Hi, everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about navigating the legal frontier, really talking about AI and the implications within legal tech. But before I go into that, a little bit about me. I'm Global Director of UX at Durham. I'm a design leader, a speaker, and ultimately, I'm a problem solver. I love to solve problems, people problems, problems to do with interfaces, you name it, I like to solve the problems. And one of the things that really drew me to Durham, which is a company that's not that well known in the UK, is the fact that we're quite a global company, which is a dynamic that I haven't really tackled. And it's in the legal tech kind of space. And legal tech is an area that is quite slow to develop. I was speaking to a customer recently, and he was telling me when email first came out and how people were actually printing out emails and then reading them, then would write the response and then get it sent as an email. So tells you a little bit about the industry I'm in. But first, let me talk about Durham. So we provide solutions for our solicitors and legal practices. We're global, so we're in Canada, the UK, Ireland, South Africa, and also Australia. So all the kind of English-speaking countries that you could get around the world. And what we do is we focus across the whole legal sector. So we do case management, which is basically how you manage a case. But we also do what we call onboarding, which is essentially to verify who you are. So if you do take on a lawyer, for example, we verify that you're the person that you say you are. And we've got a dodgy emoji situation going on there. But our challenges in the industry and as a legal tech business is increasing competition. So even though it is not as well known, slow to kind of, I guess, innovate, we've got a lot of competition globally. From our users, actually, there's high switching costs. So we've got a lot of users using systems, they've got their data in those systems. In order to switch to a new product or a new provider, actually there's a lot of cost there. So you'd have to move all your data from one system to another. And surprise, surprise, a lot of companies don't make this very easy. So you get a lot of people just loyal to a certain provider. And then the other thing, like any business, is profitability. So making money, especially in the enterprise area, it's all about how we can gain more customers, increase profit. And it's not just about the customers, it's also about what we do, and a lot of enterprise companies do, is price raises. So every year, and this is even on more commercial apps that you use, so like Spotify maybe, or Netflix, there'll be a rise in cost, essentially. And the legal market is a growing market. So in 2030, it's estimated to be a total addressable market of $46 billion. So that's quite a big growing market, especially in the enterprise arena, where actually a lot of problems have already been tackled, and you're just kind of fighting for marginal gain. So you're fighting to get like other customers. Actually, this area is a growing area. So I think these are the kind of reasons why it's actually quite exciting space to be in. And like I said before, legal tech is quite slow to innovate, slow to move forward. Customers really rely on us to show the way forward, right? So they're employing us as a technology company to provide technology solutions, but they're also looking to us to innovate, to show what the new thing is, how they can improve their practices day to day. And we take that actually quite seriously at Durham. So we take that industry leader side really seriously. What we do is we do a lot of industry talks, education pieces, which I'll go into later. So we really take that as a serious part. But who are our users? I've talked a lot about the company. Our users are the typical high street practice, right? So you could probably Google it. It's a small organization, a small company. They've got up to 10 members of staff. And they're kind of a jack of all trades. So they do all sorts of law. So you, as like the average person, would probably either Google them or you'd probably come across them on the high street, and whatever your legal matter is, you'll probably engage with them. So they're really price sensitive. They care about efficiency and the customer and that customer service. They're not so much concerned with technology, but that is changing. So their key challenges is more competition and options for legal services. So nowadays, if you were to try and find a lawyer, you would either go through recommendations, or probably most people would Google someone. And you'd look at the Google reviews maybe, and that's how people discover not only lawyers, but just services in general. And these kind of high street lawyers, they're not necessarily sophisticated in SEO and all of that kind of stuff. So they're really struggling with that increased competition. And the other one is regulatory requirements. So this is changing all the time. This is stuff that actually, as a law practice, you can't actually charge for, really. It's the stuff that you have to do. So this is another admin burden. And then the other part of it, which is the workforce is changing. So that I don't really like talking about Gen Z, but Gen Z, the next generation, they are the new consumers, but also they're the new workforce. So that is changing, and the expectations of what Gen Z looks for at a company is changing as well. If anyone went to a new job and they were using, I don't know, Windows 98, you probably wouldn't want to work there. I don't even like the fact that my company uses Teams and not Slack. We also use Confluence over Notion. I can't stand that. But there's things like that. But Confluence is still good quality kind of software. So imagine if you're Gen Z and you're used to a certain way of working, a certain way of doing things, and the company is just behind. They're printing out emails. They're using Excel spreadsheets. There's other ways that we could do this and it's more efficient. And it will probably put you off from going to a new role. So like I said, that expectation is changing, right? Even if you are employing a service, like say, for example, you want a bank account, Monzo is a really good example. You just do that all online. You don't need to talk to anyone. Just do it through your phone even, not even a desktop app. You do it through your phone, you get the card through in the post. Most people I don't even use my Monzo card. I actually just use my phone nowadays as well. So this is what, as a consumer, you're expecting. You're expecting that digital experience. And actually 62% of Gen Z has experimented with Gen AI. But the legal industry actually knows this, and they're actually aware, so they know that they're slow to change, but they also know that Gen AI is not going anywhere, and they kind of almost need to embrace that change. So even though 12%, so this was a survey that Thomson Reuters did, it said 12% of the legal industry respondents use legal-specific Gen AI today, but 43% said they plan to do so within the next 3 years. 3 years is probably quite a long timeline, but they know that the industry is changing. They know they need to change and embrace it. So how are we doing that, and what are the kind of use cases for Gen AI within the legal tech industry? So there's legal research. So a lot of the time, if you do have a case, what you do if you're a lawyer, or it's probably the admin person actually, what you'll do is you'll research any similar kind of cases. So is there any similar cases, and what's the verdict of that? So with AI, you could probably start using that and do that a lot more quicker and have a more extensive search. You've also got accounting and bookkeeping. So again, lawyers actually charge for their services. So you could use AI to basically automate that and automate the accounting piece. But you've also got reviewing of documents. So a lot of time is spent reviewing things like contracts, reviewing the terminology, making sure it's consistent. And we could get AI to really help us do this. And then you've got the drafting of documents on the flip side. So again, contracts, NDAs, all of those kind of things, they get drafted. Lawyers spend a lot of time. There's kind of a template way of doing this. Again, you could use AI to kind of help do that. Summarizing documents is another thing. So say, for example, you've got end client. They're like, I don't even know what the hell this is. you could use AI, again, to summarize that and send that through to your end client. So these are the kind of use cases that we're talking about when we start focusing on in Gen AI for legal tech. And I think the one thing that I did allude to earlier is lawyers make money through the service they provide. So how would you actually feel if you found out that you employed a lawyer and probably 99% of what they're charging you for, they used AI, and it only took them like 5 minutes? Yeah, you wouldn't really like that, probably not appreciate that. So I think at Durham, we're really thinking about how we can leverage technology to help support them. And our goal is to help our users spend less time on that admin stuff, so the admin that I spoke about earlier, and more time on billable work. More time so that they could, quality work so that they can bill. And really, really focusing on the fact that they are the experts, right? They went to law school, they spent all these years at law school, they are the experts of the law, they know how to apply it. We can use AI to really help on that admin side of things. So what I wanted to do is talk about a case study that we did at Durham, and some of these kind of, I guess, questions that came up of using AI and how we tackled them as a team. So Dee Dee, original name, Durham, Dee Dee, get it? So essentially it's an AI assistant. It basically wasn't really that sophisticated. It was using ChatGPT. And it was our first foray into Gen AI at Durham. And what we did, essentially, I'll be honest, what happened is the CEO was just like, we need to do AI, came up with an idea, then we needed to just make it happen. That's basically what happened. So what we did is we treated it as an experiment. We were just like, okay, this is going to be an experiment. We'll just position it that way. We'll talk about it as an experiment. It's not fully trained, et cetera, et cetera. Let's put it out there and see basically how our users react. Do they use it? What do they search for, et cetera, et cetera. But then what happened is we actually started talking about what are we liable for. So if you're a lawyer, you use our DD chatbot to do, say, for example, some legal research, and it gives you some information, you use it in a case, and it happens to be wrong, or DD made it up, because remember, it's just using ChatGPT. Are we liable for that? Does that mean that we get sued? When does the lawyer actually come in and use their expertise? So we really went round in circles asking these kind of questions. So how do we make sure, especially knowing that a lot of our users are not sophisticated when it comes to tech, how do we make sure that when they're using it, they're making sure they're not putting any confidential information in, they're using it in a certain way, they're not taking it at face value, so they're not just copying and pasting it and slapping it somewhere else in the case or whatever. We really wanted to make this technology available to them, but we also wanted them to understand what the limitations were with this technology. So what we did is we worked with our lawyers, and this is DD version 1, and essentially what we did is we put a lot of caveats and T's and C's just to protect us, because legal tech. So the first screenshot is essentially, you get prompted with this as a user, which is essentially read the T's and C's, you cannot sue us. And it gives you a little bit of context around how you can use DD, some caveats as well, so saying that it's just an AI assistant. So we really went down that generic kind of route. We didn't try and specify it to legal. We didn't want to kind of go down that route. We also wanted to say that it's not a support bot, so anything to do with support, don't use this for that. It didn't help with the fact that the positioning of it was the typical positioning for like intercom. So it was typically just in the corner. So we really just made a lot of effort to try and make sure that it wasn't support, you use it for this. And we focused on like drafting documents, emails, that kind of stuff, and maybe doing a little bit of research. So you accept the T's and C's, so you can't sue us. And then what we had is the second, that gets dismissed, then the second one is this. And basically it introduces DD to you. It tells you, again, those caveats as well, so don't share any sensitive information. We're not giving you any legal advice, for example. And it's an AI assistant, it does make mistakes, just check your work. And then we basically said, ask question below. So we put that out there. We actually put it out to a beta group. We did some testing with a small group of users. And when we actually spoke to some of these users, we actually found out what some of their attitudes were towards AI. And we had a wide range. We had a range of people that were super skeptical and was just like, we're just going to wait and see what happens. We know it's in its really early stages. We don't trust it. To people who were just really embracing it. The people that were embracing it actually had younger people, again, coming into the workforce and really saying, we're using this, and they're changing their processes, they're changing what happens because they're essentially using it. So, DD version 1 didn't really go that well. So it was way too general. What we actually found is it was quite US-centric as well. So we, even though we're a global company, we only used this in the UK, released it in the UK. It was very US-centric, and it didn't feel lawyer-specific as well. So the answers that were coming out just have felt really generic. They didn't really feel like something a lawyer would say, and it wasn't phrased in that kind of way. So we didn't do great. So what we did, like any design team, we iterated. So what we actually went back to the drawing board a little bit. We worked quite closely with a lawyer, but actually not our lawyers. It was a lawyer who was a sole practitioner, and he was kind of someone who really embraces AI in his daily practice. And he basically really just simplified it, right? So he said, actually, this should be about legal information, and we should be focusing on legal information, because that's why you're going to use it. But we also made sure it wasn't about customer support as well, so again, strip that out. And then instead of those 3 bubbles of loads of information that probably no one's going to read, we actually narrowed it down to a few lines. So this is still a bit of work in progress. So we just released this last week. But I thought I'd just show this because it tells you it really shows some of those questions that we were asking as we was developing this, especially when you're putting something out there. And actually, as a user, you might take this as advice and then maybe use it as a case. So we're really trying to be careful with that. But also, the lawyer is charging for a service as well. So how do we kind of caveat some of these things? And how do we make sure that the user's kind of in control, knows what's going on? So off the back of this, we actually developed 3 principles as a team, as a company. First one is education, so educating the user, and I'll go into a bit more detail around this. Second one is trust, so how can we, again, like what Ezra said earlier, is how can we, with a design, give an element of trust? And then the third one, which I think is really, really important, especially with AI, is that user control. So how does the user feel like they're in control at all times? So education, I did allude to this at the top. So our users, even though they're the same types of users, they're at different points in their journey. So how do we kind of support them through that journey? How do we say that actually Durham is a safe place for you to experiment, for you to learn about technology, and we will go on this journey with you. So we do a lot of education. We kind of really want to make sure that our users don't get behind. But we also wanted to start with really straightforward use cases, right? So really clear, straightforward use cases that they can use and they can experiment with. And we also make sure that there's caveats before use as well, and a bit of training when we're releasing products. And I think the other thing is, when we think about the industry, there's actually a collective benefit to adoption throughout the whole industry. So imagine you go to a new law practice, they're using all the kind of mod cons, they're doing AI, they're doing all this other stuff. And then a house is probably a good, so you're buying a house, so you've got one person on the other side, the other vendor, and they're going through the old kind of school way of doing things, which if you have bought a house, you know it goes into a black hole probably for about 3 months and then comes out the other side. But on your side, with your lawyers, they're doing things really fast, they've got everything in order, they're using all the kind of new technology, and they're actually waiting for the lawyers and the vendor on the other side. So they're still on that 3-month timeline while you're on your 24-hour or whatever timeline, right? So what we want to do is we really want to make sure that the industry moves along There's no point in just having one law practice or 5 law practices. We need the whole industry to move along so that it helps the end consumer. And then creating trust. I think especially with AI, it's really, really key to create trust. So what we've started doing is really create partnerships with our users, right? So we're creating products that are really, again, I know it sounds like a no-brainer, but really focused on the legal industry. We're being really upfront with the capabilities of the tool. So why would you use it? What do you use it for? Giving some examples. I think one of the key things that I've definitely learned is tone of voice is really important. So lawyers speak in a certain way, they phrase things in a certain way. We need to make sure that we actually understand our users and our tone of voice is in that way that they speak. And then the other thing is terms and FAQs are easily accessible and visible. So probably more so than a consumer product or any other B2B product, we actually want to make it accessible because lawyers are lawyers. They're quite cautious. They want to make sure they're doing their research, they understand the product before using it. And then the other thing is, again, with that creating partnerships, is really iterating quickly on that feedback. So hearing that feedback, listening to them, iterating with them as well. And that kind of follows through to users trusting us with that next innovation. So today it's AI, tomorrow I don't know what it's going to be. They will kind of follow us through as we evolve, as technology evolves. And that's kind of the goal of partnership, really. And then the last one is keeping users in control. So making sure that we're not just automatically doing a whole load of things, and then you're kind of wondering, okay, what's going on here? What happened? Incorporating things as part of their workflows. So again, it goes back to really understanding the users and what they do, and making sure it feels like a natural part of what they do rather than an add-on. When it becomes an add-on, especially in enterprise, like earlier was said, is that you get used to a certain way of doing things, and it's really hard to break that habit. So what we want to do is incorporate AI into that, incorporate automation into that, so it feels, again, a natural extension. And then the key thing is like suggestions over direction. So rather than telling them what to do, suggest something. So a good example of this is if you use Gmail and you're typing an email and it has those suggestions, you can either choose to ignore it or you could just actually swipe and accept those suggestions. So suggesting things, giving options, and then if they ignore it, they're still able to do whatever. And then the last bit is allowing users to edit and delete again. So giving them that option, they can go in, they can edit it, they can delete it. And it enables users, especially in that enterprise kind of space, to customize technology to suit their needs and their workflows. So especially when you're dealing with so many different customers, even though they're in the same industry, they'll be working in a different way because that suits that company. So giving the user an element of control allows them to have some sort of customization, some sort of control in that workflow. So that's kind of the end. So in summary, really understand the context of your users and what they're trying to achieve, but also what their background is. I think the other thing, especially in in the enterprise UX space, is use case first, then technology. I think a lot of the times you want to automate things, you want to add technology. I think especially if you've got like an overzealous CEO or you're in a startup, everyone just wants to make things, use tech to solve every single problem. Actually think about the use case. Think about, does it actually make sense for you to add technology to it? Or maybe there's a simpler solution. There's been a lot of times when actually a process change is better, cheaper, than actually adding technology. And then the last bit is your users are your experts. So a lot of time, especially in enterprise, your users are basically, they're the SMEs. So they really understand their job, they understand the needs, they're the people that you need to speak to, but also it's not about necessarily replacing them, it's about how can you leverage them so that they're doing more of what they enjoy and less of the admin and the stuff that they don't really enjoy. And that is me. So any questions or anything?
Thank you so much, Vanessa. We do have time for a couple of questions, especially whilst we're setting up our chairs for the panel stage. So any hands up with questions on AI and design? Go ahead.
Thank you, Venessa. That was really great. I know you're quite early on in the journey with DD, so this is a prediction question, so it's probably really unfair. But how close, in your opinion, are you to end users getting hold of this and it being valuable to them? You know, serving like 80% of their legal needs and relying on the remaining 20% to lawyers to kind of step in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think if you actually look at the legal landscape, there's a lot of companies that are actually just focusing on particular use cases. So all those bubbles that I showed earlier, there's a company that solves individual ones. But the challenge is, if you're a company, if you're an enterprise business, is the fact that you actually have to pay for multiple suppliers and multiple vendors to do different things. So what we're doing at Durham is actually trying to link all of that and create journeys. We're doing it in different ways. So we're doing it in one way with partnering with some of these suppliers, but also we're doing some of our in-house stuff like DD. I think the key thing is understanding those use cases and those workflows and just making sure they slot into that, rather than trying to create loads of bolt-on kind of tools that then in your head you have to like, oh God, I've got all these tools that I need to manage. But also if you are the bill payer, you've got multiple bills that you need to manage as well, which is another challenge.
Thank you for your question and for your answer, Vanessa. Any last questions before we get all of our speakers back up here? Okay, awesome. One final one.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for the great talk. So I'm wondering more about what you said about the use case and then the technology on the back end. So I worked with a startup, and the project is still going on. I helped build the MVP, and it's more about the AI facilitator to help peer groups and things like that. Now, the issue is there's a lot of work that's been done with the engineer to just get the MVP going. And my concern is that tech is now gradually being created and in place without much consideration around the use cases. So how do you begin to have that conversation or turn that around in a way that you can prevent what you can see coming, basically?
Yeah, I think the key thing is get data. So make sure that they're recording what users are using it for, make sure that you can see what people are clicking on, all of that kind of stuff. Just gather as much data as you possibly can. Part of it is just accepting that it's going to go out, right? So version 1, it's going to go out, it's going to be a hot mess, you're going to be right. Fine, right? Version 2, it's get the data, understand how users are using it. If you get access to customers as well, speak to them. Really, again, understand them and their workflows, which I'm sure you're already doing, and then come up with a solution. I think the first thing is make sure, because what you're going to do is you're going to come up with some crazy solution that's going to take ages to build. But that is the kind of vision of where you want to get to. What you actually want to do with the engineers is work out how you can create those thin slices so that you can move towards it. Because if you come with something like, we need to redesign it, and it needs to be all this, it's not going to get built. So really work out those thin slices so you can get that in and slip those in. And then again, keep recording that data, keep understanding what users are doing. And even for yourself, make sure that you are being able to track how UX has improved what has been produced and what's come out.
Thank you. I love how everyone's referring back to earlier talks, and thin slices was Ezra's. Awesome. Thank you very much, Vanessa. One final round of applause for Vanessa and her awesome talk.